All right, this is part 2 of Unit 1A. We're looking at some fallacies that can be made and that are made. We've gone through 6 examples. We've got a couple more examples to go through, and then we'll do some problems to apply these things. So the next example of fallacy is personal attack. So we're right here, and unfortunately this fallacy is used quite frequently. So if we look at this one, the example kind of explains it best. So Gwen says, you should stop drinking because it's hurting your grades, endangering people when you drink and drive, and destroying your relationship with your family. And then Mary Lee says, I've seen you drink a few too many on occasion yourself. So notice that Gwen makes a pretty good argument with a premise and some supports for her conclusion that Meryl should stop drinking. However, Meryl basically just disregards or rejects the argument and turns it to Gwen. And even if Meryl's claim is true, it's completely irrelevant to Gwen's point. And so what Meryl's done is resorted to attacking Gwen personally rather than arguing logically. And so kind of the little explanation over here is I have a problem with a person or a group that's making a certain claim, therefore that claim is not true. So they disregard the claim in a lot of cases and go right after the individual or group and don't address what has been mentioned in the argument to begin with. Okay, next one, circular reasoning kind of explains itself. Here's an example here. Society has an obligation to provide health insurance. So we're talking about society, its obligation to provide health insurance, and then we say because health insurance or health care is a right to citizenship. And so, in this one, we're just kind of restating in different words what we've already stated in the beginning. So circular reasoning is basically start and end in the same place and don't get anywhere. So the next one is a diversion, and this is sometimes known as the red herring. And so I'll let you know what red herring means here in a sec. But here's the example. We should not continue to fund cloning research because there are so many ethical issues involved. Strong ethical foundations are necessary to the proper functioning of society, so we cannot afford to have too many ethical loose ends. And in this one, the argument begins with its conclusion. Should not continue to fund cloning research. But this is about ethics. Argument is about ethics. And so they're trying to divert your attention away from the real issue by focusing on another issue. And so this is P is related to Q, and I have an argument concerning Q, therefore P is true. So they're talking about one thing, but then diverting your attention to something else. And one of the reasons they call this the red herring. So a herring is a fish that turns red when it's rotten. And the use of this term, red herring, can be traced way back to the 19th century when British fugitives discovered that they could divert bloodhounds that were pursuing them by rubbing a red herring across their tail. And so that's where this idea of red herring comes from. It's a diversion. You start with a topic, but then you quickly go to something else to try and convince them that the original topic was true. Okay, the last one we're going to look at is the straw man. And in the straw man, let's say, suppose that the mayor of a large city proposes decriminalizing drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on enforcement. However, and this usually deals with a couple individuals or groups, challenger for mayorship in the upcoming election says the mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, but I do. So notice the mayor never said anywhere that drug use is acceptable. But by proposing, decriminalizing some drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding of jails and saving money on enforcement, this individual makes the implication that, well, this person wants to decriminalize drug possession, therefore he doesn't think that drug abuse is wrong at all. So pretty vague there, and again, this little box will help us out. So I have an argument concerning a distorted version of some claim P, therefore I hope you are fooled into concluding I have an argument concerning the real version. So you distort what you're talking about, and then you hope to kind of reshape them into believing your conclusion. So the distorted, in this example, the distortion is, the mayor wants to decriminalize drug possession, and kind of the fooled conclusion is, by decriminalizing, that means the mayor doesn't believe that drug abuse is bad, or the use of drugs is bad or wrong. When in reality, the reasons why the mayor wants to decriminalize drug possession have nothing to do with whether he thinks it's right or wrong. He's trying to get rid of another problem, which is overcrowding in jails and saving money on enforcement. So the straw man argument is used quite a bit. So now, after we're talking and going through those, how many different? We had 10 different logical fallacies. Here's some steps that you can take in evaluating media information. So number one, first and foremost, consider the source. I recall watching one article that said, according to Facebook, and they quoted a single Facebook post as their most legitimate source. So, you have to hopefully be able to see through those things and know that there may be some bias on someone's Facebook post. Next thing, check the date, make sure that it's when it was written. Is it relevant? Is it outdated? Then you need to do your best to validate the accuracy. Is there a good reason to believe that it's accurate? Or is there anything that makes you suspicious about that? Watch for hidden agendas. And are they presenting things fairly and objectively, or do they seem to be trying to manipulate or hide something? And then lastly, don't miss the big picture. And try and look at things as a whole when you're looking at information that's being presented to you. Try and, if there are clearly two sides or more than one side, try and see things from a different perspective to make sure that none of these fallacies are coming into play, and that that things are being portrayed accurately. Okay, now let's look at and analyze a couple of fallacies here. So we're going to consider the following examples. We want to identify the premises and the conclusion of the argument, and then briefly describe how the fallacy occurs in this argument. So the first one, the fallacy is limited choice. So it says, he refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment's rights, so he must be guilty. So when we look at this, the premise is going to be he refused to, so I'll just write P for premise there. He refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. So that's the premise of the argument. And then, since he refused to testify by invoking his Fifth Amendment rights, therefore he must be guilty. Okay, clearly limited choice. very narrow in scope. There could be other reasons for invoking the Fifth Amendment rights. That doesn't necessarily mean that someone is guilty. So there are there's our premise and our conclusion that we have. And again, limited choice because of, we state the premise, refused, and then our only conclusion is he must be guilty when there could be definitely others. So we've limited the choice there. Okay, the next one, we're looking at the straw man argument. Okay, so the mayor wants to raise taxes to fund social programs. So there's our premise. So she must not believe in the value of hard work. There's our conclusion. So we have the premise and the conclusion. Okay, this is the straw man argument. And if you think about it, so the mayor has kind of characterized as lacking in this one. When we look at the conclusion, where the mayor's kind of being characterized as lacking a belief in hard work, based off of a completely unrelated issue. So we go from social programs to someone not believing in hard work. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to distort your view of the mayor by fooling you into this conclusion that we start with this and we end with something that's really not true, and we're really not even looking at the premise that was given. So we're not attacking the mayor, but again, we're distorting something that the mayor wants to do. And so when you see that, it's not necessarily an attack, but we see a distortion, especially on a personal level. That's going to be our straw man. So now let's go ahead and see if we can identify which fallacies are coming on here or are taking place. I'm thinking I might be kind of up against the clock. I've got just a couple minutes. We'll be able to finish. So in these, we want to identify the premise and the conclusion, explain why the argument is deceptive, and if possible, identify the type of fallacy. So the first one says, my uncle never drank alcohol and lived to be 93 years old. That's how I know that avoiding alcohol leads to longevity. So when we look at this, the premise is going to be that this person's uncle never drank alcohol and lived to 93 years old. And the conclusion is basically that avoiding alcohol leads to greater longevity. Oops, let me change my color here. So avoiding alcohol leads to longevity. So we make a claim and then a conclusion, and we're basically stating that never drinking alcohol causes someone to live longer. And this would be what we call our false cause fallacy. Because there are definitely many people who don't drink alcohol but don't live to be 93 years old. There may be a correlation there, but one does not cause the other. But in this argument, we're definitely saying that one causes the other. Okay, the next one, we have the senator as a member of the National Rifle Association. So I'm sure she opposes a ban on large capacity magazines for ammunition. So here's our premise. The senator is a member of the National Rifle Association. And the conclusion is this person is sure, oops, change my color again, is sure that she opposes a ban on large capacity magazines. Hopefully you can see, we're not necessarily attacking this person, but we're saying, the senator is a member of the National Rifle Association, and then the conclusion starts to distort things. So based off of her relationship to the National